Good morning. We are starting off the second to last week of the school year, the second week of December. This is week 4 of my Goodreads project. All of the active voting is done. The last day to vote was yesterday at the time of filming this. And so nothing that I read is going to make a difference in what I vote for, which is kind of unfortunate for the book that I started last night. So here's the plan for this week. The plan for this week is to focus on books that are on my Kindle. I have several books on my Kindle. Right now I'm reading This Woven Kingdom by Tara Mafi. And for some reason, I guess the reviews that I had heard about this book came out earlier this year. It was in a subscription box. They just were mixed and sort of trending on the negative side. I assumed that I wouldn't like it. Well, so far so good. I'm about 40% in and I really like it. It'll all determine like when things start to come together and the plot starts to build, whether or not I stay liking it. It's pretty typical for this sort of Arabian fantasy with the down on her luck girl main protagonist and the prince male protagonist. But I don't mind. I like that. So I'm reading that. I think the other books that I have on ebook, I have So This Is Ever After. That's another one of the YA books. I really don't know much about it. I have my Arc of the Sunbearer Trials. I believe I have All That's Left in the World, which is post-apocalyptic, I think, and it's a bit of a romance, which I'm a little about because I just read a book that was on the fantasy list that I don't think should have been there at all, and that's If You Could See the Sun. The only bit of fantasy was that the protagonist could turn invisible, and it was never explained and she could never count on it, and then it just went away at the end. So those are the 3 that I'll focus on for during the week. I'll probably pick up a physical book after those, or if I get any other of the ebook versions. I think I'm going to focus on ebook, which means I need to make sure to keep my Kindle charged. Now, the audiobook that I started reading. Okay, no, before I get into that, the plan for audiobook moving forward, I went ahead and purchased 3 Audible credits. You know, the bulk thing where it's makes it a little cheaper, basically, because the Keeper of the Lost Cities, they are Audible exclusives. That's why I couldn't get any audiobooks. I hate Audible exclusives, but be that as it may, I did that because they are longer books and this will give me some more audiobooks to listen to. And also I'll be able to get some of the high demand Scribd books, Scribd Unlimited, sort of. But anyway, and that includes The Ballad of Never After, which I have physically, but I am reading more during the school week, audio. That's the plan for those. Now the book that I'm reading right now, I knew that I would love it, and I hope it doesn't disappoint because I'm only about 7% into the book. It's Babel. I am loving it. I love the combination of history and linguistics and playing with word meaning. I eat that stuff up. I am head over heels in love with this book. I hope it does not disappoint. Okay, so I'm set up here to do the first part of my December unboxing. So I figured I'd go ahead and do an update. Okay, I'm gonna hold off on what I really want to update just to catch up. So it's Tuesday. I didn't update this morning and I didn't update last night because I was still working through the same books that I was at the beginning of the week. But I'm about to finish both of them. So on an ebook, I'm finishing This Woven Kingdom and I'm really enjoying it. It's not doing anything amazing. It's probably going to be a high 4-star read for me, a really enjoyable read, a read that I will want to get in physical copy to keep in my collection and get the sequel. I hope that the ending holds up with that. I think even though it's set up a lot of things that I've seen before, I really enjoy it. And I think these are tropes that I do enjoy, and I really like what's being done with the main character and how she has decided to live her life and how things are unfolding for her. Now, is the romance kind of insta-love? Kind of. You know, I knew it was going to happen, so I wasn't taken aback by it happening. And I also don't think it is in this, oh, I just met you yesterday and I'm going to sacrifice my life for you today. I think both of them realize that they are attracted to the other person, but they're not willing to, you know, give up other things for them. And I think that sort of attraction makes sense to happen that quickly. But I'm really enjoying that. So I don't know that I've gone over what this Woven Kingdom is about. So this Woven Kingdom is by Tahereh Mafi, and I have sort of enjoyed one of her other contemporary books that I've read before. It just didn't end up doing anything for me. But it is Arabian set fantasy. And as you can see, I like Arabian fantasy, Arabian inspired fantasy, I should say. You have two main characters. You have Kamran and you have Eliza. Kamran is a prince. He's an heir to a throne. His father is dead and his grandfather is on the throne. His grandfather is a very interesting man. He's supposed to be ruthless, and there's a little bit with characterization there that I'm kind of like, well, not quite following through on the ruthless, I'll do whatever thing with how he changes sometimes, but I'm not sure. Maybe that's part of it. Eliza is working as a servant. Like, her whole family is gone. She is a jinn. So like there's this accord that's happened between the humans and the jinn so that they're not at war anymore. But the jinn are looked down upon. But she is this rumored lost princess that will save everyone. And so Kamran's grandfather doesn't want her around anymore. That's the setup for the story. I'm enjoying it, and I'll likely finish that tonight. The book that I'm really, really excited about, and everyone saw this coming, Babel. I honestly don't think that there could have been a more perfectly tailored story for me. You have fantasy. You have Britishness. Sorry. You have academics. You have language study. You have history. Everything is pulling together. And the way that R.F. Kuang is crafting this story, I don't mind that it's set over a wide span of years. I really think this book was perfectly crafted for me. I haven't quite finished it yet. I have about 50 minutes left in the audiobook, so I am so close to being done. That's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to finish this tonight. This book, there have been a lot of people that have not appreciated how on the nose, so to speak, a lot of Kuang's critiques of British imperialism and racism and all of this stuff is. But it needs to be said. It needs to come out there and be said. One of the things that I knew was coming in this, so the whole part of history of this, it's set around the time of the Opium Wars in China. And Britain has long wanted, so I taught this with my students. So here's the background. Britain has long wanted what China has. But China looked at British goods and went, yeah, that's a bunch of crap. We don't want that. So no, you can't buy our stuff. Then the British found out about opium, got the Chinese hooked on it. And so now the British have something that the Chinese want. Trade ensues. Well, Chinese government looks at what's happening to its people and goes, no, the bad things are happening to our people. We need to cut off this trade. Britain was like, screw you. We still want all of your stuff. So we are going to bomb, basically, for that time, your cities with our military might, force you to submit, and then pay for the war that we started. That's actual history. The way that she's telling the story and the way that the fantasy element with silver is woven in, I love this so much. This morning, I made my top 10 list for my top 10 books of 2022 that I'm going to film later on. I think I might have to make some edits to that. another day, another update in my filming location because I have another unboxing. So I'm gonna go ahead and give an update. I did indeed finish both of those books yesterday, and This Woven Kingdom, wow, I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I was going to. I realized, like, the way that Tara Mafi built up these characters, it made it look like they were fitting a stereotype, but then she sort of subverted it, but not in overt ways. And then that ending, I'm so glad I didn't read it at the beginning of the year, because then I would have had to wait even longer for the sequel. I am really excited about that sequel now. And Babel, yeah, Babel is making its way onto my top 10. We have my stack actually right over here of my top 10 plus an honorable mention. And I am going to have to rearrange this and think about that. The honorable mention will probably stay. I'll just probably have 2 honorable mentions now. I finished those last night. That means that I started 2 new books today. I haven't started the physical book. I'm reading an ebook. I'm going to read The Girl in White by Lindsay Curry. That is a middle grades horror, so that's the kind of horror that I can be okay with. The possibility that it's actually really horrific is pretty low, so I'm okay with that. And then audiobook, I am actually listening to The Ogress and the Orphans, and I remember just being struck by the whimsy of The Girl Who Drank the Moon when I read that last year, and this book has all of that. I love Kelly Barnhill's voice, narrative voice in here. It's just fantastic, and she's building up all of these different pieces and telling it like a fairy tale. So I really enjoy it. I'm only about 15% into the book, but I'm enjoying it. Okay, so I'm not sure where I actually left off the last update, but I've been filming a lot today and almost didn't do this update. However, I need to because I'm reading a lot, and I am desperately trying to make sure that I have enough tokens for going to the Strand because I plan to buy a lot. But if you saw the list, I mean the stacks of books that I have back on my desk back there that I don't use it as a desk, I use to store all my books. Yeah, this is not gonna be enough. Anyway, I think when I last updated, whenever that was, it's now Friday evening. Probably should have said that to start. I had started The Ogress and the Orphan. I actually have finished that and another audiobook since then. The other audiobook was really short, and I'll talk about that in a second. So Kelly Barnhill, I first read The Girl Who Drank the Moon last year, fell in love with her writing. And I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna go do coffee thing. Okay, I'm back. I have this electric kettle that I use to heat up the water before I do my French press, and I don't know how long ago, but sometimes it still does the automatic shut off of the boil, but most of the times it doesn't. And if I don't, when I hear it boiling, if I don't go get it, then it just boils and boils and boils until all the water's gone, and that's not good for the kettle. So anyway, I first got introduced to Kelly Barnhill with The Girl Who Drank the Moon last fall, I believe. And I love that book. Apparently it was really big on BookTube when it came out. And I'm gonna turn this light back here on and see if that helps with the lighting. Who knows? I don't actually have that much light back there. Anyway, so The Ogress and the Orphan. I had just barely started it the last update, and it's being told by this omniscient storyteller. And you don't find out until the end who that storyteller is. And you know it's not any of the characters being talked about, but they're telling it like this whimsical fairy tale, like an actual fairy tale story. And it's telling all of these different pieces to the story. And the passage of time is really malleable. And that's a little frustrating for me, but it really suits the purpose. It goes along with the fairy tale idea. As it starts to build up the setup of these different pieces, the story gradually gets going, I should say. I fell in love with this book while simultaneously being incredibly frustrated. I don't know what it is about certain books that really frustrate me when they so clearly illustrate something that's wrong with society. I don't know why that sort of frustration is what it takes for me, apparently, to love a book. In this, there's a bad guy, and he's trying to make the ogress, the titular ogress, out to be the bad guy, to deflect attention. And there's an incident that happens where everyone assumes, oh no, something terrible must have happened to cause this. That starts the rumor, but then it turns out that it was something, not innocuous, but it was something very different. Someone wasn't evil when they perpetrated this act. And it gets rectified, and it's rectified by the ogress, but she's seen making things better, and it's all part of how people see what they want to see and take the information that fits into their paradigm, and that's what they hang on to. And they use different things to dismiss certain people. Like all of the orphans are dismissed because they are kids and they're not reliable, or this or that. And the ogress, if she was doing that, she had to be evil. And of course, this character, complete opposite of that. It's so insidious in how that happens. And yes, the bad guy has a little bit of magic that he's using to amplify all of this, but these people so readily fit, so readily went along with it. Is it wrapped up like a fairy tale, really simply, happily ever after, basically? Yes, but I still really loved it, and I put it on my bookshop.org wish list. And that is yet another really amazing book that didn't make it out of the first round on the Goodreads Choice Award. And something like Small Town Pride and Rise for the School of Good and Evil, that rant over. Okay, so the other audiobook that I read and finished, it was really short, and I have kind of mixed feelings about it because of how much I enjoyed the build-up to this point in the series, and that is Bastille versus the Evil Librarians. I went ahead and purchased it even though it was hardcover, and all the other books I have are paperback, because it was on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. And I understand why it didn't make it out of the first round. I actually wouldn't put it out of the first round. I have fondness for it because I've invested in the series, but it was really short. It was this really tacked on ending. And yes, it was completely planned from the very beginning. And the way that the fifth book ends, you can't end the series there. And I appreciated different things being added into it and how we dealt with how dark things got at the end of the Dark Talent. But it felt almost like fan service a little bit with this book. So I enjoyed it. It's probably going to be one of my lowest rated Brandon Sanderson books, not counting that one series that we do not speak of. It's probably going to be around a 3.5 stars. It was a decent read. I'm glad it didn't take very long for me to read it. I listened to it on audiobook, so that's the second audiobook. And I have started Lodestar, which is book 5 in the, almost said We Were Children, in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. What I plan to do for the next week or so is alternate back and forth with Keeper of the Lost Cities and another audiobook so I can get caught up, because Stellar Loon is the only middle grades book that I have not read from that list. So, but I have to read the other 4. I have to read 5, 6, 7, and 8 before I can get to Stellar Loon. Now physically, and it's ebook, I am reading So This Is Ever After. At first I was intrigued by what the author was doing, because it's sort of like a campy take on what happens after the bad guy's defeated. You know, they lived happily ever after portion of it. But I'm really struggling with the discrepancy in the style of book that it's supposed to be, this, you know, big old fantasy book, and the way that the characters act and the very modern language that they used. It's almost like that 1996 Romeo and Juliet story, which was all modern language and style. I think it's been a long time since I watched it, but it was Shakespearean language. and it just didn't mesh to me. And I know that's a style that people like, but it's just not working for me. I can't really get invested either way in it. Once I finish this update, I'm gonna go finish that book, and that'll be okay, but I don't know. So after I finish that, I don't think I have any other ebooks currently checked out for the Goodreads Choice Awards list, so I think I'm going to pick up When Women Were Dragons because I'm clearly in a Kelly Barnhill loving mood. Okay, so I am here to wrap up the vlog. Again, I'm going to, in the new year, I'm going to rebrand these as recent reads because I don't do a lot of like vlog style content. Since the last update, I'm trying to think of what I was listening to on audiobook before my current read, and I can't remember, so that makes me think that I wrapped it up the last time because I had already started the book when I was listening to it yesterday. And my current audiobook is Lodestar, which is book 5 in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. My plan is, even though book 9 is what's on the list, my plan is to alternate back and forth between what I'm calling a backlist Keeper of the Lost Cities book and one that's currently on the list, because once Scribd turned over the month, because they say they're unlimited, but they're really not. But once that happened, there were 2 or 3 more on there, like The Ballad of Never After and Sunbearer Trials and one other that I'm forgetting at the moment. But my plan is to alternate between those two to get myself close to possibly, I don't know if I'll be able to, but possibly finishing the children's and middle grades list with Stellar Loon by the time I wrap up my Goodreads project, and then also the other lists. So I will say, it is different listening to The Keeper of the Lost Cities, which unfortunately is an Audible exclusive. I really don't like that. But anyway, it's different listening to it than reading it physically or ebook, because the narrator is adding voices to, obviously, the characters. But I do like that the way that she's portraying these different voices seems believable. And the way that things are unfolding with Keith, I really appreciate. And it is interesting, though, sometimes the telepathic conversations where 2 people are having this, Sophie and somebody else are having the telepathic conversation, but you know that there's 1 or 2 other people around, and so you're picturing in your mind them just standing there doing nothing, having this conversation while this other person is off to the side. It's happened various times. So a little awkward, but I get that that comes with the territory. I will probably finish that later today, and probably I'm going to decide, I haven't decided yet, it'll probably be based on length, but it's either going to be Sunbearer Trials or The Ballad of Never After is going to be next. As far as physical books go, yesterday, completely in one day, I did read When Women Are Dragons. I said I was going to. And this, I have so many thoughts about this. I, hands down, love Kelly Barnhill's writing. The way she crafts her prose is just beautiful and poignant. There are ways, the sentences that she had in here, I don't know that I've noticed in her middle grade. I think this is her adult debut. But in this, there were very short sentences. There was the idea of repetition that happened a lot, and it became really powerful. I thought this book might be super high up in my opinion of the fantasy list. It's still high up, but not as high as I thought at the beginning. I loved how this unfolded. The things leading up to the Great Dragoning of 1955. So I should back up and tell you what this book is about. So in this book, there is this phenomenon of women becoming dragons, but no one talks about it because it's too feminine, you know, among other reasons. And then there was what was called the Great Dragoning of 1955, where like 600,000 some women became dragons. And these were all wives and mothers. And obviously there's a lot of fallout from that. And the main character is affected because her aunt chooses to become a dragon and leaves the family. But it doesn't start there. It starts actually when she's a kid. But it's told from her perspective, looking back from decades on. And I loved the beginning of this, the way that it unfolded and the way that Kelly Barnhill was addressing these different societal issues. She has done this in every book of hers that I've read. I think what brought it down a little bit for me was the way that it ended. So it starts when she's very young, around 4 years old. She's remembering, so the portions when she's really young are small. Most of it is when she's teenage, actually. So you'd think this is young adult, but it's not told that way. I think what was immediately surrounding both before and after the Great Dragoning was really well done. But towards the end, you think you've gotten to a climax in the story, but the narrative trickles on and on and on and on until she's a very old woman and it's the end of her life. And that part brought it down. The fact that it just trickles on and she's very like lesson giving at the end of it. And I get that if it's told as a memoir that someone might be more prone to do something like that. It just brought it down a little bit, but I really appreciated what she talked about in here. Kelly Barnhill's actual writing, very strong book. So I'm gonna look over here and see which books I read this week. I think as far as physical books, the only one that I have, according to what I've set over here, that's right, I did read more ebooks. So I read So This Is Ever After. I also read something else, and I can't actually remember. I've read so many books lately, it's really hard to keep straight. So I have two stacks here. I have one that's what I read physically, and the other is what I read as an audiobook. I read more audiobooks than physical books. So we have Bastille versus the Evil Librarians, and we have The Ogress and the Orphans. And I think I finished Babel in this one as well. So I definitely read minimum a book a day. I think there were a couple days where I managed 2 books. To actually get to the end of the project in a reasonable time, like before I go to New York, I would need to read more than that. I don't know if that's going to happen because I've got a lot of video editing and things to do for all the videos that are going to go up both this week and next week. Obviously, because when I'm in New York, I'm not going to be doing any video editing. I had a really good reading week. The plan actually going forward next week, I'm going to talk about in the next vlog. I had some really good reads this week. A book, spoiler alert, that's going to make my top 10. I think my top 10 video is actually going to come up before this one. And another really good middle grade and a thought-provoking adult fantasy. Pretty good reading week. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.